Well, hello there. You're watching African Perspective. I'm Tsipiso Makwetla. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. So tonight we'll be reflecting on the attacks that have been happening or occurring, especially in the Gauteng region of South Africa, and the various reactions to it in the region. So we'll tell you a little bit more about that, and we'll also talk about food security later. But first, let's start with the issue of those attacks in South Africa. We'll start with this. The African Union. The union says it is confident that South Africa will put an end to the violence reported in parts of the country where some South African nationals are reported to have been attacked and their property either vandalized or destroyed. SABC's Coletta Wanjohi spoke to the spokesperson of the AU Commission chairperson, Eba Kalondo, in Addis Ababa.
The African Union Commission was very encouraged by was the very quick action taken by the South African authorities to make some arrests and apprehend those who were responsible for these acts. I think what is important now is for further acts to calm the situation, and I think we have full trust in the South African government to do exactly what it needs to do to be able to protect the lives and properties not only of its citizens but also of residents, no matter where they come from.
The chairperson of the African Union Commission, Mr. Fahia, said that the AU is ready to assist South Africa to end the violence. What ideas are we looking at here?
The African Union nor the Commission is in no way suggesting that we are going to solve South Africa's problem. South Africa is a sovereign nation. South Africa is one of the greatest nations on our continent, to which, and with reason, has become a beacon of prosperity and hope, which is probably why incidents like this sadden so many on the continent, and also because South Africa holds a very special place in the collective consciousness of all Africans. This is well deserved, but it's also a very heavy burden to bear in times like these. So what the African Union Commission, and again let me be very clear, when we offer our assistance, is to be able to support the South African government and its people in its own quest to be able to address the root causes of incidents that lead to situations like this.
We have seen several African member states complaining that their citizens have been harassed during the few days of violence in South Africa. What can the African Union do to prevent retaliation from these African member states against South Africans?
We are together in times of woe and woe. This is not a good time. So to talk about things or perceptions of retaliation, there is no siege. There is a very serious situation in a country that is undergoing its own national conversation, which is traumatic, but which is not different from difficult national conversations that other nations on this continent are having. So there's nothing very particular about that. In terms of social misery and economic aspiration. It's a universal held wish. But I think when we start using language or perceptions of exclusion, of national identity versus a continental identity, I think that we should rethink that, because enough grief, enough violence, and certainly enough anger and resentment has been spewed. I think what we now need to do is recalibrate the conversation, distinguish what is true, what is not, and also do something about it together.
The violent incidents in South Africa are happening at a time when the country is preparing to be the chair of the African Union in 2020.
South Africa has been elected by its fellow African nations to head the Union. That is a demonstration of the esteem that all member states hold South Africa in, to be able to take on the helm, to be able to speak on behalf of the continent and as South Africa. And because of that, it's also because we believe that South Africa has the requisite leadership, past, present, and we hope future, to be able to hold on to the common continental idea of who we are. So yes, I think South Africa may be going through a very traumatic time right now, but I think it's important for South Africa to know that it is supported, that we expect leadership from it for all of us. And that, yes, it's an honor that we bestow on very few. And South Africa is among those few.
Meanwhile, our foreign editor, Sophie Mukwena, spoke to former South African President Kgalema Motlanthe and Ricardo Lagos, who is the former president of Chile, about acts of xenophobia and other forms of intolerance.
Well, I think the first thing that we should all recognize is that everyone is a foreigner somewhere. So the idea that there are foreigners and it's really harping on the same note of the we are the norm and there are the others. So once you proceed from that premise, you are then likely to diminish the humanity of those that you categorize as others. So in this instance, South African nation, by its fabric, is made up of people who came from all parts of the world. So you can't today say, now we're stopping the tide, we are the norm and the others have no rights and should not come anywhere near us. I think it's very ignorant to do that. Very, very ignorant. In a world which has this mass communication, information flies swiftly, and the same people, when they support their favorite soccer teams, if you were to suggest that their favorite player who comes from Zambia, their favorite player who comes from Zimbabwe must go home, they would want to kill you for suggesting that, which means that no human being is ever really defined by one element. The element that I am not documented or I originate from a sister country on the continent, that shouldn't define who I am. And relationships should really be, crafted, taking the totality of, human beings. Yeah.
This question that you mentioned, remember me, the Nobel Prize winner Carlos Fuentes. He used to say, we in Latin America, all of us are migrants.
Yeah.
Some arrived from the street of Berlin 30,000 years ago. Others arrived later from Europe, from Spain, to colonize America. Others arrived later when slavery was introduced in North America and in South America also. And therefore, the French coming straight for Africa, which is true. And he said, those that arrived first arrived 30,000 years without passport and without visas. But here we are.
Yeah, we are.
And I think that you are quite right when you mentioned, yes, at the very long time, everybody will tell us that we human beings, as we know now, were first established in Africa.
Now, more than 100 demonstrators clashed with police near a South African-owned supermarket in Abuja, Nigeria on Wednesday as resentment simmered over attacks on foreign-owned shops in South Africa. Demonstrators burnt tyres and hurled rocks outside a mall where a branch of ShopRite supermarket is located before being repelled by a dozen police. They were reportedly saying, "We must avenge the death of our citizens in South Africa." Joining us now is our correspondent in Nigeria, Phil Ihaze, speaks to us from Abuja. So, Phil, what exactly is the latest on these reports of retaliatory looting against South African businesses?
Well, so far, those reports which started coming in from Tuesday night about how that many Nigerians were retaliating, and that what I mean by that is attacking South African-owned businesses in Nigeria, in particularly Lagos State or your state, and basically those two states as a Tuesday night. Specifically Lagos, they were attacking some outlets like ShopRite, Pep stores, and looting, goods, valuable goods. In fact, even going into some other outlets owned by Nigerians. But, as we speak, most of that has been contained because security has been beefed up in several parts of not just the Lagos and Oyo State, Abuja as well, because there were, some other kinds of protests or threats that were supposed to take place in Abuja, the Federal Capital Territory, today. But security personnel were able to cordon off the area and resist that attempt by many Nigerians. Also, we know that there's been very heated conversation or reactions from Nigerians on social media insisting that the Nigerian government should do more to ensure that they stop these attacks on foreign nationals, which of course Nigerians are part of in South Africa.
Okay, so when you say they should do more, I've seen just from some social media reaction to President Muhammadu Buhari's statement that he is sending an envoy to South Africa. Some are saying that he should be the one saying he's flying down for talks with President Cyril Ramaphosa. Is this a shared sentiment amongst many Nigerians?
Well, it's more like a mixed reaction. Some quarters saying that the president should be on his way to South Africa right now discussing these issues, critical issues, with his counterpart in South Africa, President Cyril Ramaphosa. But other quarters are saying that the president will also have to explore all diplomatic approaches, which he's already doing, approaches like, for example, boycotting the World Economic Forum, which was supposed to kickstart, or which Nigeria was supposed to attend today in Cape Town, South Africa, as well as recalling the Nigeria's ambassador to South Africa, although that is supposed to happen after the special envoy has returned before the end of the week. And also, of course, send a special envoy to summon the South African High Commissioner, which that has already taken place as a Tuesday. So, some other people are saying that after all these options have been explored, and then we'll have to now take it to, if at all the attacks don't stop, then the president might take it to the next step. But of course, you recall that the president President Buhari has a visit to South Africa scheduled already in the month of October.
All right. So, for just reflecting back on those attacks that have been reported specifically in Lagos, I saw that the information minister there, commissioner rather, in Lagos has condemned the attacks. He said the attacks have been carried out by people who claim to be avenging the deaths of their citizens in South Africa. So, his sentiment seems to be that he doesn't believe that these were legitimate acts. What are other governors, other officials, not only within the government, but generally in Nigeria, saying about what is really happening?
Well, the mood in Nigeria is that retaliatory attacks by aggrieved citizens in Nigeria is not for them to go hitting out on South African outlets in Nigeria. In fact, on social media, there's been responses from high-profile entertainment professionals or artists, as the case may be, saying that that is not the way to sustain peace or demand for peace, as well as the government. The presidency has spoken, several tiers of government have spoken as well to say that they are condemning those attacks. In fact, the security personnel, like I said earlier, they've increased the presence in several parts of the country to show that that is not the position of the government. In fact, as we speak, about 100 have been arrested so far in Lagos State alone, several others in Abuja from protests that occurred earlier in the day. So that also shows that that is not the position of the government. So some of those people carrying out those attacks, some of their families were affected in South Africa, but of course we'll have to wait for the government to explore its options, because it's only at the government level that this crisis can be tackled.
All right, thanks a lot, Phil. We'll leave it there for now. Our correspondent in Abuja, Nigeria, Phil Yahazi. We're going to take a quick break, but then return, look at this matter a little bit more in depth with a representative of the APC and, of course, a political analyst. Don't go away. This is African Perspective.
Coletta Njohi for SABC News in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
Leon Sanyange, SABC News, Entebbe, Uganda.
Chris Ochamringa, SABC News, Beni, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Sarah Kemani for SABC News in Accra, Ghana.
Phil Ihaza, SABC News, Abuja. Daniel Kijo, SABC, Dar es Salaam.
Welcome back. You're watching African Perspective. So we mentioned more than 100 demonstrators clashing with police near a South African-owned supermarket in Abuja, Nigeria, on Wednesday, with what is said to be simmering resentment over attacks on foreign-owned shops in South Africa. And we've seen various reactions in other places as well. President Muhammadu Buhari of Nigeria saying that he is set to send an envoy to South Africa to speak to President Cyril Ramaphosa. We're joined now in the studio to talk about these reactions to the All Progressive Congress of South Africa's chapter chair, Bola Babarinde, and we're also in conversation today with international relations expert Dr. Charles Sikala. A very good evening to you both, gentlemen, and thank you very much for speaking to us.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening.
Perhaps let me start with you, Mr. Babarinde. We've seen from reports suggesting that there's anger from Nigerians that these attacks are not being described as xenophobic attacks. Is that the feeling back home?
Yeah, I will answer that, and you pardon me for 2 or 3 minutes to say some things that I prepared.
If you could just really make it short, we really don't have time, so we'd like to engage both of you.
Actually, in Nigeria, they took it as xenophobic, because this has been happening. It's every year thing now. It's like it's a ritual that we know maybe next year, 2020, another one will happen. But I want to get something clear. South African government is not doing enough, because we know in our own history that for several years, even in 1960, it was our Premier Abubakar Tafawa Balewa in 1961. He was the one that made sure that UN actually pushed the then apartheid regime out of UN. And also, we realized that during Obasanjo regime himself, as the president of Nigeria at that time, he paid $3,000 from his pocket and also mandated all the executive or military council at that time to give them $1,500 each from their salary. And even my father, when he was alive, 2% of their salary as civil servant was taken, you know, to emancipate South Africa. But one thing the government of South Africa is not doing, a lot of people are ignorant about the relationship between our country and South Africa. We are brothers. We fought. We used all our resources at that time. Even we lost $41 billion, you know, in revenue for the money we're supposed to accrue to us from oil we're supposed to sell to the apartheid regime. But we refuse to do that.
I'm going to have to move you along, Mr. Babarinde. So when we talk about xenophobia, you say, yes, that is the case, and it is to be predicted almost annually. Do you think it's specifically against Nigerians?
Yeah, I'm concerned about Nigeria. It's not specifically about Nigeria, but about broader Africa, sister Africans. Because we have other foreigners that are white in color, they are brown in color, he may be green in color, but why must it be the same people of the same color? But one thing I always say is that we should forget about the fake boundaries, the fake borders given to us by colonial masters. We are one. Africa used to be one nation, but they came to divide us, and we are not, you know, good enough to tell our people that, come, we are one. You know, take for example, Paul Kagame. Paul Kagame now is the one championing One Africa. You go to Kigali or you go to Rwanda, you get your visa at the port of entry. Imagine in around in the 60s, when some South Africans, the struggle hero, when they were unable to travel, they were not given the passport in South Africa. 300 South Africans were given passports in Nigeria to travel to wherever they want to go, free. That means they were not even considered as foreigners. They were considered as Nigerians at that time.
Dr. Sikala, it certainly has been a tenuous relationship between South Africa and Nigeria. Is it as one-sided as Mr. Babarinde shows it?
No, not really one-sided, you know. Thank you very much. And you know, as much as we talk about the history, and which hasn't been continuously be told, especially to the young South Africans who are growing up now, to see how the relationship was, you know, and where at that time. And it's unfortunate that at that time we didn't have social media, you know, to come up with some evidence and footprint that this is how the African National Congress was assisted by the whole continent, you know, to support and, you know, to rally behind and make sure that the apartheid system is collapsed, you know. But besides that, you know, we must differentiate between xenophobic practices and the criminal activities, you know, in addition to many other effects of these violences which are happening in South Africa, like he has likely mentioned, that it's not the first time, you know, these social and economical problems. But we must understand that the reporting as well, especially from the media, the police and the government securities, they must not report in terms of nationalizing criminal activity.
It's not conflated
so
issues.
It's a lot of conflicted issues which are happening, and we must be very...
So to your mind, largely what is it? Is it xenophobic or Afrophobic, because you pointed that out, Mr. Babarinde, or is it criminal?
It's a mixed masala, and I think we have to deal with those two different issues separately. You know, where there's criminal activities involved, it has to be condemned, but they are interlinked in the sense that the ones who are maybe might be involved into those criminal activities, they might be classified as from a certain nationality. And once South Africans receive that certain nationality are perpetrating into certain activities, criminal activities, they will retaliate as well.
I want to come back to whether or not South Africa is doing enough and taking responsibility, as Mr. Babarinde lamented here. But I need to ask you this question very briefly. There have been reports saying Nigeria is considering asking for sanctions at the UN against South Africa. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, it may happen because the government is here to protect all the citizens that are in the country, especially the legal one. And you know what? The government of South Africa is not really doing enough. And everything that we need to do to make sure we call them to order must be done. Because take for example, some of the people that are caught during these criminal activities, we want they are arrested. There's about 100 or 150. What have they done to them? And if they're actually charged to court and they are sentenced, they must make it public so that people will know that there's a deterrent. So that next time this thing happens...
There have been 300 arrests
arrested,
so
but what
far.
did they do to them? What did they do to them? Because 2 years, 3 years ago, they arrest them and they leave them.
So you call it for harsher sentences?
Harsh sentences, so that people, there will be deterrent.
Okay. I need to ask this, Phil Yahaza, our correspondent there, did speak about the diplomatic push. We know that an envoy is going to come here. Is at any point likely a démarche to be issued to the South African representative in Nigeria to explain what is happening?
Yeah, sure, it's going to be. Because the way it is, I said that I already told my people at the party level that this thing is going to get out of hand. Take for example, this xenophobic attack or this criminality has been happening, but there's no retaliation in Nigeria. Have you ever heard? But when you are
What do you mean
pushed
there's no retaliation in Nigeria? We just spoke to our correspondent in
yes,
Abuja
there
who tells us that there have been attacks against South African foreign interests.
It's just now. What I'm saying is that it's over when they are doing it over and over again. You know, let me tell you something.
But
2 years ago,
that has also happened in the past, Mr. Babarina.
It
There
never
was a
happened in the
time when
past.
Nigerians were even saying that Boko Haram should be sent to South Africa to deal with the South African government.
That must be a rumor, because I never heard that. That must be a rumor.
There was
that
even a video that has circulated.
Social media can
okay,
say
because
anything,
we are running out of time. Is it true? Let me ask, is this true? Is it factually true that Nigerians have never retaliated? I'm not talking about scales, but...
They have in some way, you know, but it is not like the way now the other leaders as well, like Zambia, who's getting involved to have this sorted out. Because now it's like the other states, member states, has to help South Africa in trying to mediate this and find a solution. Earlier on, yes, in 2005, this happened and many people, foreigners, were killed, not only Nigerians, Zimbabweans, and other from other nationals, but they were waiting for South Africa to act. But I think now this thing is getting out of hand, you know. And one thing South Africa must also investigate is who are the beneficiaries of these criminal activities, who are perpetuating for people to start fighting.
So the South African government at some point did talk about a third force. So you're saying we should possibly believe that there's somebody who's fomenting violence in the country?
Of course, we can't rule out that. I mean, there are people who are interested in the rand to lose value so that they can capitalize onto the financial market, you know, downgrade, lose the investors' interest so that they will buy the shares at a cheaper rate. And
but Dr. Sikala, it certainly
immediately.
is not just been Nigerians who've complained that the South African government has not done enough to protect foreign citizens. Where is the South African government lacking, and why is it not acting fast or swift enough in dealing with these?
You know, they are trying to find out what is the problem, and you know, in the third law of conflict, there's always a third party involved, and that third party, it's very difficult to find. It needs a lot of forces to put together. Here, President Cyril Ramaphosa has invited the heads of state to sit down and make sure that they find a solution to this. And I think from this interaction with the other member states, you know, they should find up a situation where they can combat this. These people who are protesting on the ground, they are actually pawns of the system which has been created. And if you ask them why are they protesting, what is wrong, you know, some of them, they're saying, no, foreigners must go. It's because of what I mentioned earlier as well, where they report that a Nigerian has killed a South African. And once you create that trauma in the earth movement, you know, then the other, you have so much retaliation from other people.
Mr. Babarinde, Lagos-based human rights lawyer G.T. Ogunye has said that while he recognizes that there are major problems, that Nigeria itself has to do navel gazing, that they have to make immigration unattractive, as in fix the problems in Nigeria. What are your thoughts on that? Yeah,
even America, Australia, Canada, people still immigrate for economic reasons. You know, it's not because of, definitely it's part of it, you know, bad governance in the past, but the present government is doing whatever way. We have a lot of things. But I want to digress briefly to South Africa, how they can solve this problem, because you said we don't have much time. You know, I believe that a lot of people are ignorant, especially the youth. They are very, very ignorant. They need to do awareness. They need to tell the people of South Africa how important, how close, Nigeria especially, I'm concerned about Nigeria. Nigeria especially to them, how we help to emancipate, you know, and also I want South Africa to borrow a leaf from Paul Kagame. Paul Kagame is preaching borderless Africa, one Africa. Once we know that Zimbabwe is not different from Nigeria, Nigeria is not different from Congo Republic, people will not say go home because they believe
I need to ask
this is
a question. You talk about political programs, so let's talk about solving the criminal aspect. So is there an acknowledgement that while, and it's on both ends, South Africans, there's criminality, foreign nationals, there is criminal acts that have been perpetrated there. Is there going to be an acknowledgement of that programs to put in place to educate South Africans to that, yes, while there are foreign nationals who commit crime, there are those that aren't?
Yeah, that's sure. That's exactly what I'm saying.
So you would support the arrest of those who are?
Sure.
Absolutely. So, Dr. Sikhala, just a final word from you. Where do we go from here? Just in strengthening regional cooperation, collaboration and not competition.
Yes, I think we shouldn't compete as Africans. I think we have to work towards trying to find the solutions to our problems, as if we can't handle this, it's going to escalate to very dangerous situations. And I think all leaders must meet and try to resolve this, educating their citizens as well that this is the way forward to go.
Right. Thank you to you both for coming and sharing your input with us. South Africa Chapter Chair Bola Babarinde of the APC and the International Relations expert Dr. Charles Sikhala. Now, the African Green Revolution Forum is currently underway in Accra, Ghana. It aims to provide a platform for global and African leaders to develop actionable plans to move African agriculture forward. The theme for this year's forum is Grow Digital, leveraging digital transformation to drive sustainable food systems in Africa. Our correspondent Sarah Kimani is there and has been speaking to several stakeholders.
Good evening and thank you for joining us on African Perspective. Tonight we are discussing food security in Africa. Now, the food sector in Africa is a $1 trillion market. However, the continent's food import bill still stands at $35 billion. We will be talking to experts who just take us through what more the continent can do. We begin by talking about digitalization of the agriculture sector, and we're talking to Michael Hailu, the director of CTA, and I'm sure he will be telling us more about CTA, what they do, statistics on digitalization of food security, of food in Africa, of the food markets in Africa, and what more the continent can do. Thank you very much for joining us. There has been a very slow uptake of digital technologies on the continent. What do you think is wrong, and what is the continent doing wrong?
Well, you're right. Digitalization for agriculture, we might say, is not moving as fast as we'd like it to move, but there has been a tremendous growth in the last 6-7 years at a rate of 44% growth, especially in the type of solutions that are being provided by enterprises, governments, NGOs, and so on, serving farmers, you know, for example, to have information and advisory services or market linkages or financial services. So there is quite rapid growth in terms of this type of services, but of course they are not reaching the number of farmers that would like them to reach, and more importantly, the farmers that have been registered for these services are not all of them regularly using these services. So you could say that in terms of the use and in terms of the coverage, and especially in terms of also the balance between men and women farmers, we still have quite a long way to go. But there has been quite some progress as well.
Now, poor infrastructure, expensive smartphones, lack of policies. Is this really going to work? And do you think there are too many challenges standing in the way of the uptake of digitization?
Well, okay, there are a number of things that we looked at, for example, in terms of what we call digitalization for agriculture infrastructure. You need to build strong infrastructure, digitalize many of these background resources that we need. For example, we need digital soil maps, we need digital weather information, we need pest and disease surveillance, and also digitally registered and all that. So there are a number of services that need to be digitized so that you can build a lot of services on top of them. We also need to build on digital literacy. You need to train people, farmers, extension workers, how to use these technologies. Because in any case, we still need people, like extension people and so on, but we have to empower them with the technology and with the digital tools so that they can provide more effective services at a lower cost. So it's really building the capacity in terms of the infrastructure, training people, and also designing these services that are very well tailored to the needs of farmers, because we found a lot of solutions that are not really fully responding to what farmers need. So there is a lot of work to be done in different areas, and of course a number of countries have done very well. I mean, you give the example of Kenya, but there are also many other countries that are still lagging behind in Africa. So it also differs from country to country, the level of engagement with the digitalization in agriculture.
However, when you speak to farmers, and we spoke to some yesterday, their fear is that even though they love these technologies, they may lose their jobs. Take, for example, if a drone is going to, spray pesticides in a farm for 1 hour and 10 farmers would have done that for 2 days, then they're worried that they'll lose their jobs. And then when you look at the statistics, more women were farmers, and more women now, less women are using these technologies compared to 75% of young people. Does it mean we will edge out the woman? What happens? Are people set to lose their jobs?
There is, of course, always danger that some of the kind of jobs can be replaced. For example, in the retail area and so on, you could see a number of potentially jobs being replaced by digitalization. But also, as you train people, they can move into the higher part of the value chain. They can do more specialized work. And what we are also saying is that we are not really aiming for a purely digital solution. You really need strong human network, in terms of, as I say, extension workers and other value chain players. You need very strong, human intervention using technology to make, to make a difference. So, of course, certain areas could be replaced by by technology, but of course, a lot more will be created, in terms of, opportunities and expanding the markets and improving the quality of products and so on. A lot more jobs in value addition, can be created through technology.
Do you sense a political will when you speak to political leaders, when you speak to, heads of state? Do you feel that they understand the need to uptake of digitalization? Do they understand the need for IT in agriculture?
There is quite a broad agreement that digitalization, as it has made a huge change in the economies and lives in other areas, they also see great potential in terms of the agriculture, agribusiness, really improving efficiency and achieving all this transformation agenda that we have for agriculture. So everyone agrees. But the question is, of course, some countries do it very well. They put in place the policies, the investments, the capacity building that's needed to move forward, this agenda. So in our report also we have shown the countries that are doing really well. Of course, every country has still things to do to make it even much more advanced in this area, but you could see 10 or 12 countries that are doing reasonably well. Well, you could see.
The other ones can know where they
Well, you could see, it's actually we have shown on a chart how 45 or so countries where they find themselves, across the spectrum. And you could see, a number of countries that are really doing well and others not so well. So obviously, also almost everyone agrees about the importance of this, doing the actual work in terms of investment, infrastructure and policies. I think many countries still lag behind.
So Africa is now in it, but what other away out of Africa, what other countries or what other continents have done this and really, come out successful and been able to feed themselves and become food sufficient?
Well, we have seen it in many countries. I mean, India might be a very good example. China could be another good example where they have huge platform run by Alibaba, where they are servicing over 30 million farmers into, linking them into global value chain. So you could see the benefits of digitalization in many contexts. So definitely there are lots of lessons from other countries that Africa could learn from.
And finally, can Africa feed itself?
Of course, otherwise I wouldn't be in this business. So we have to work on it. Of course, there are challenges, climate change and all kinds of challenges that we have. And maybe right now the news may not be good that we are, not food secure and the situation may not be getting better. But definitely I think that's the only way out, in terms of achieving economic progress, jobs and livelihoods. So obviously I don't think there is much choice for Africa other than to focus on transforming its agricultural sector, to benefit everyone.
Now, while the mobile phone penetration in the continent is admirable and has been used to help in digital technologies reaching even the most rural areas in Africa, there is still a problem: infrastructure. We are joined by Dr. Ed Mabaya from the African Development Bank. Thank you so much for joining us. Africa missed the first industrial revolution, the second revolution, and now we're in the digital revolution. What are the chances we can take advantage of, and are we going to miss this revolution? And why is it important that we involve digital technologies in agriculture?
We've been struggling to catch up. This is why we have such important meetings as the Africa Green Revolution Forum. However, when it comes to the digital revolution, we can all agree that this time around, Africa is fully on board. I can tell you that over the last 5 years, the highest adoption of mobile phone subscription has been anywhere other here in Africa. Africa is actually leading and pioneering in some areas. I'll give you an example. With just the touch of a phone, in most African countries now, you can go and buy tomatoes on the street and pay for them using your cell phone. The rest of the world, the first world, the developed world, people are still writing checks. So we can agree here that this time around, Africa is not just fully on board, but it's actually pioneering. We are leading this digital revolution in some ways, and I think we have a very, very unique opportunity to capitalize on this momentum to bring on board sectors that are more important. Indeed, most Africans have a cell phone. You go to the most remote rural areas in Africa, everybody has a cell phone. But much of that content there, people are on WhatsApp, they are listening to dogs singing on YouTube. We have a window here where we can actually include content that is relevant to the people of Africa. And that's where digital agriculture comes in. If only we can start to upload solutions onto those digital platforms that unlock the potential of agricultural sector, then we'll be on our way to developing the continent.
What are the unique opportunities that this mobile phone and these digital technologies offer the African farmer?
The traditional agricultural model was that you would have an extension officer come and visit you maybe once a month on a motorbike. They will tell you information about crops and plants and diseases, maybe about market information. These days, that information is instantaneous. A farmer can find out immediately what that disease that is on their crop is by pointing a cell phone to a maize leaf. They can immediately tell what disease is affecting their crop. They can just call and find out what the market price is, when is it a good time to sell their crop to the market. All this information that used to take so long and used to be very expensive to provide is now instantaneously available to almost every farmer everywhere. So what these solutions do is that they allow farmers to do what they've been doing, but do it much more efficiently, do it much more on time, and therefore put more money into the pocket of the farmer itself.
There are also limitations to digital technologies. Maybe tell us, because when we look at it, we think this is the silver bullet. We have it now. As long as every African has a mobile phone, as long as we have the fiber optic cable running outside our doors, we are right.
To me, digital solutions are like the new kid on the block. There's a shining limelight on this little kid. Yes, we should be excited about this potential. But we have to remember that the things that move agriculture are not cell phones. the key ingredients to developing agriculture have not changed fundamentally. You still need good seed to farmers, you need good fertilizers, you need water and irrigation, you need extension services and training, you need mechanization. These things are still very core ingredients that transform agriculture. What digital solutions do is that they enhance these particular access to these particular tools. So I believe that digital solutions are not a replacement of the traditional solutions. They supplement. So you bring them on board, suddenly farmer has access to extension service. They can find out what is the right seed for them to plant. They can find out where is the cheapest fertilizer to buy. They can find out where is the best price for my commodity. So I believe that digital solutions are an add-on to the solutions that we already have in mind. And it's important to emphasize that we should continue to invest in those very core areas that get agriculture moving. They have not changed, they remain the same, but digital solutions just allow us to reach more people faster so that they can do this agriculture more efficiently, they can make more money from it, and transform agriculture from just a way of life to a business solution where farmers can make money out of it.
Tell us about what the bank is doing to ensure that the infrastructure is correct and is right to ensure that farmers then are able to use these tools to their advantage.
The African Development Bank, our bank, finances development projects all across sectors. So we do large infrastructure development projects. We do roads, we do telecommunication, we build bridges, we do electricity. All these things are necessary ingredients that are required for you to spur the digital revolution. So we're setting the backbone here on which the digital revolution can ride on. Secondly, more closely to the agricultural sector, we have just launched within the bank a new flagship called Digital Solution for African Agriculture. We believe that to create these solutions and take them to scale, we need some financing or provision of a public good. So we start by working with African governments. We want to create the enabling environments that will unlock these digital potentials. We want to create the infrastructure, fiber optics. We want to create farmer registration platforms. These are all critical ingredients that only governments can provide, and private sector comes up and picks up from that. We also are supporting private companies that are investing within this particular area. As you heard this morning, there's more than 500 or 400 digital solutions across the entire continent. Or some of these might not succeed in the long term, but we really need scaling up. The unfortunate thing is that most of these are still, 1,000 farmers here, 10,000 farmers there. We want something that reaches Africa at scale, millions of farmers. And to do that, you need somebody who can finance that kind of the successful solutions. This is where we come in as a bank. We identify winning solutions. We work with African governments. We work with the private sector, and we try to scale up the solutions that are working across the continent, thereby providing more solutions to our farmers here in Africa.
So how much are you investing in this?
Oh, we're investing a lot. So let me just say that within the Feed Africa strategy under which you fall, we're investing about $1.5 billion a year across all of Africa.
A market of $1 trillion US, but a food import bill of $35 billion. What are we doing wrong, and can Africa feed itself?
Africa can feed itself. You are looking right now at a living testimony of somebody who grew up poor on a rural farm in Zimbabwe. With 10 children, my parents were able to grow on a small piece of land crops that they use that money to send their kids to school. All the kids went to very good schools thanks to agriculture. I believe that this is not an isolated example. You go across the continent of Africa, 60% of our population relies on agriculture. There's no other solution. This continent cannot develop without developing agriculture. So we have no option. Whether this is going to work or not is not really the question we should be debating. It has to work, and we just need to find ways to make it work faster and for everybody. We need to make this revolution inclusive of everybody.
This is the 9th African Green Revolution Forum organized by AGRA. Now, the aim of these meetings is to build on each other, and you will be hearing that from Vanessa Adams, the Vice President of AGRA. She'll be taking us through what do we expect from this meeting, what does digitalization in agriculture mean, and what should we expect when the curtains come down on Friday. Tell us why digitalization, why Africa, and why now?
Why now? why not? Everyone else is doing it. We have to keep up. We have to compete. Africa is nearly 1 billion people, over 1 billion people, right? Technology is here. It's actually everywhere on the continent already. The question is bringing it even further into rural Africa and using it in a way which is productive and driving productivity, driving markets, driving transparency. So social media in Africa is very active, right? But you can also take the same tools and use it for marketing, use it for business linkages, use it for transferring information about improved seeds, sources of better quality blended fertilizer, reducing the fall armyworm, which is attacking so many of the farmers' productions. Or even very interestingly, with the advent of the African Continental Free Trade Area and the regional economic communities, finding markets outside of one's borders. Or for translation, you go to a country where you haven't actually learned the language, or you don't know who to find. You can even check references. You can find sources of financing. Why not?
In all of this, where does AGRA fall?
AGRA is in a very privileged position to be providing information, assistance, accompanying these governments on this pathway. You know, when governments transition and change, AGRA has been able to provide even some in cases continuity, and to say these are the top 10 strategy and strategic areas that your previous government was implementing, and the AGRA technical teams have been working on developing the capacity of those governments to continue on the implementation path, transferring knowledge. AGRA is working with over 200 implementing partners in the 11 countries that we're in. We have staff on the ground. We've managed to, since last year, actually increase our teams in the field substantially, and we're doing incredible work, whether it be in Mali, in Burkina Faso, in Ghana, even in Nigeria for West Africa. There's significant investment on the ground. We have been working very closely, as you might have heard, with the regional economic communities to further the regional food trade.
When the curtains come down on Friday, what do you expect to come out of this meeting? This is the 9th AGRF?
I expect an acceleration of shared resources, shared learning. I'm thinking of it as an open source coding, where as more people come in and add to the coding, the tools all improve exponentially.